to give Symphonic an irrevocable investigate or take action against you. You see that they are exploiting artists and being like, hey, you forfeit your royalties the second we get wind of even a claim of something. But you, the distributor, are gonna take the royalties and keep them for yourselves. I have distributed my music through Symphonic, and I was with them for a number of years. Now I'm coming at you today with a review of the terms of service that are currently posted on Symphonic's distribution website. And this is what you sign when you decide to distribute your music through their platform. So whether you realize it or not, this is the contract that you have agreed to if you're going to distribute your music on this platform. And I have been doing this. We have gone through CD Baby, TuneCore, and Distrokid's terms of service. And so we are basically revealing what these contracts say. And I have a couple of specific questions that I'm hoping to address with this video. And the first is in regards to what can this particular distributor do with your royalties? We care about this question very much because as we've discovered, with other music distributors, that they not only reserve the right to take your royalties, sometimes for just a claim. Not that there's ever proof, not that something is ever actually made a determination, that there are facts. And we have a problem with this. So now we're on a mission to expose these distributors and the terms that they are making you sign in order to get your music on music platforms. So, number one, what can the distributor do with your royalties? Number two, what do you need to know about what's in this contract? And then number three, my experience with Symphonic. I will probably share it with you at the very end of this. But, first and foremost, I'm the attorney here. I've been doing entertainment law and music for 10 years and as an actual musician since I was about 4 years old. So I'm very passionate about all of this. So without further ado, let's take a peek at the Symphonic terms of service. All right, so one of the things we love taking a peek at is when was the last time that they revised this? So last updated, this is from their website, last updated as of July 22, 22. And the reason why we care about that is because what I have found doing the lawyer thing for a long time is that companies have a tendency to make updates to their terms when there's been a problem. They're like, oh my gosh, so for the next time this thing happens, we're going to put it in our terms so everyone has to sign to it and everyone has to agree to it. So they haven't updated it for a few years. And then they go, this kind of made me laugh just a little bit. I go, the terms, this is the agreement, and this is between us, Symphonic, and our affiliates, including but not limited to, and then they list out, they're like, symphonicdistribution.com, symphonics.com, symphonicscms.com, symblo.com. It's just all these ancillary company websites. And so you are agreeing to all of the usages related to these websites. So that just made me laugh for a second. Because normally it's like you're using this website, which is like this website, and that's it. So they went a little above and beyond. But what I found, and I'll say this right out the gate, one of the things that I did find to be interesting with Symphonic's terms of service is that I saw some stuff that I didn't see in any of these other distributor terms of service. And it really caught my eye. For example, when we were kind of going through TuneCore terms of service, what we did notice is that they have like 30% of their terms dedicated to all the ways that they can like take your royalties and come after you for anything that they've given to you and charge your cards and bill interest on money that they're keeping for you in their accounts. Like crazy. Anyway, back to Symphonic. So we're going to focus on the most important stuff that you need to know. These agreements, generally speaking, talk about, hey, you're giving us the right to distribute your music, right? General stuff. So I'm not going to cover the general stuff. I'm going to cover the stuff that really spoke to me. So starting with section 2, those responsibilities. You are responsible for paying any and all costs related to the transmission of data and as otherwise may be required to use the services. Now, the way that they define services is basically use of any of these websites up here, okay? So your use of the services, including with respect to downloading, installing, launching, uploading, streaming, payment processing, and using. So right out the gate, they're like, you're responsible for paying any and all costs related to the transmission of data and as otherwise may be required to use the services. So here's the thing. When I'm reading through these agreements, my job, and when you guys hire me to look at these contracts for you, is to foresee how this stuff can be used against you and how it can sometimes just be so overly broad, because it's like you're agreeing to any and all costs related to the transmission of data to use our services. I'm like, what does that mean? Now, the last time I worked with Symphonic at least then they had two options as far as they would take like a portion or you could pay a fee. I don't know if they're just doing the percentage deals right now. That seems to be what I hear, because sometimes you guys reach out and you're like, hey, here's the Symphonic terms of service that they want us to sign, and you'll have me review it before you actually sign up on the platform. So anyway, back to this. So we don't really like very overly broad language, but let's move on. So section 2, sub 1, license. Subject to this agreement, Symphonic grants you a non-transferable, non-exclusive, revocable, limited license to use and access the services. Your use of the services is at your own risk. I just like laugh when I go through these agreements. My fundamental issue that we've been just pointing out with these distributors is I'm just like, it pisses me off that musicians and artists and people who make music want to have their stuff online. And in order to play the game and be in the industry, you really should have your music on all music platforms. And I'm all about like direct to fans, sell your stuff on your website just to like make money from your music. But I go, from like just a marketing standpoint, making sure people can hear you. In order to get our music on music platforms, we have to go through distributors. And the issue is that distributors just make their own agreements. And you have to click the button and say, I agree to the terms of service in order to get your music on these platforms. That's my problem. It's not that a company doesn't have the right to say whatever the hell they want in their contract. That's fine. It's that we as artists don't have any bargaining power. We can't ask for revisions. That's my problem. So then it's like, just so you know, your use of our services is at your own risk. And then it goes on multiple places here to be like, and we saw this in most of the distributor agreements. If you get a virus, if you suffer some kind of harm or harassment or like anything under the sun, if anything happens to you, it's not our fault. You used the platform, you knew it. And I'm just like, what is that about? Like, can someone please write an agreement that's reasonable here? So usage at your own risk. Number 3, Symphonic reserves the right at any time to modify, suspend, interrupt, or discontinue the services in whole or in part with or without notice to you. You agree that Symphonic will not be liable to you or any third party for any modification, suspension, or discontinuation of the services or any part thereof. Again, just like, so we can take down your music, anything can happen if the service is discontinued. And this is part of the issues that I have personally had where something happened that interrupted my business. And we've seen this with many artists, much bigger than me, much bigger than many of us, right? Who will just have their music taken down for an allegation of streaming fraud or something. And so in the spirit of like artists who are actually making really good money from streaming, not all of us do, right? But to the extent that you are running your business and all of a sudden your music is gone because someone makes some kind of claim against you and it might not actually be based on anything real. Again, this is where I just kind of start to have some of these issues and I go, okay, so Symphonic reserves the right at any time to discontinue, to interrupt the service without any liability to you. Guess that's something else that we just agreed to. Good to know. User content, section 3. You are solely responsible for your music. That's what that definition is for. It's your music. You assume all risks associated with submission of your user content, including in respect to any disclosure of your user content that personally identifies you or any third party. I was like, you assume all risk associated with submitting your music on our platform, including in respect to any disclosure of your music that personally identifies you or any third party. And I'm like, okay, are you talking about like, so if I'm the user and I'm like, I'm dumb and I make some kind of mistake and I accidentally like put my legal name or something, is that what they're talking about? Or are they saying, because, typically with these companies, they have you put your actual information when you're signing up for an account. A lot of you, in fact, even reach out, to my office and you have me like set up businesses and register trademarks and get copyrights and you want to remain anonymous. And there's creative ways to do that. So for some people, it's a huge deal. And so I don't know what this pertains to, but this is another example of something that's very broad. You assume all risk in regards to any disclosure of your personal identity. And so I'm just like, I don't know. I'm pausing. That's all we're doing. All I'm doing is just as I went through this is stuff that I just noted. I'm like, that's interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff in here that was just not in other distribution terms of service that we reviewed. All right, so we're still in section 3. Section 3, sub 2. This is the license. You hereby grant and represent and warrant that you have the right to give Symphonic an irrevocable we're going to come back to that, non-exclusive, royalty-free, and fully paid worldwide license to reproduce, distribute. Okay, I'm fine with this. This is what they do. You have to give them the license to put your stuff on music platforms, right? To reproduce, distribute, publicly display, perform, prepare derivative works. I'm going to come back to that. Of, incorporated into other works, or otherwise use and exploit your content, and you grant some licenses of the foregoing rights for the purposes of including your music in the services. Okay, coming back to this. You give Symphonic an irrevocable right to distribute your music. I did that when I read that word. I did in my head, at least. That's an ugly word right there. When you sign a contract with anyone, with any company, like, the whole deal is that, guys, like, this is a short-term thing. Symphonic, love ya, but don't plan on, like, being with you forever. And so the grant of an irrevocable right is, you know, I don't know. Maybe it was missed by their legal counsel. Maybe it wasn't meant to. I don't know. But that's a big word. You're irrevocably giving them the right to distribute your music. So I don't love that. Okay. But also to prepare, so to make, you're giving them the right to make derivative works and incorporate those into other works. And I'm like, what the hell? Is there some again, I was with Symphonic for like a decent amount of time. Is there some service that I'm not aware of where they're like remixing your song or something? So in the grant of rights, you know, that just jumped out to me because I'm like, that is really aggressive and broad, and I don't know why they need that. Because again, going back to these distributors need to have all these rights, right? We don't want to get into trouble because, like, you gave us permission to distribute your music. I'm fine with all of that, but it's just when there's stuff like this, I'm like, what? 3 sub A, you agree not to use the services to collect, upload, transmit, display, or distribute any of your music that violates any third-party right, including any copyright, trademark, patent, trade secret, more right, privacy, right of publicity. So, you know, this is general stuff we see in distributor agreements. And they're like, look, if you do something naughty and you get into trouble because now there's copyright claims against you and all that stuff, A, you're saying you're not going to do it. And then we're going to talk about what's going to happen to you if you do it. And also, they don't want, you know, music that's unlawful, harassing, abusive, tortious. So all this stuff is very broad for purposes of just protecting these distributors. But the problem that I run into, because they're like, we don't want your music if it's vulgar. That's their word. We don't want it if it's defamatory, if it's false, if it's intentionally misleading, right? This is where sometimes, and this is rare, and I will say this, the most common stuff that you guys contact my law office about is recouping royalties. And it's because, Crystal, I got locked out of my account. They took down my music. They took down my playlist. This is the most common stuff. It was all lies, and they're telling me that I'm paying for fake bots, and I didn't. And we have a very high success rate with getting accounts reinstated, monies released, all of that. For the more rare instances where it's like, we're not going to distribute your music, or we're taking down your music because, you know, your music is like too political, it's too this, it's too vulgar. Like, these are not defined words. So it just really gives this unilateral right for Symphonic to make all these decisions, and you don't get to say anything about it. You don't even get to challenge it because it was in the contract and you signed it, right? They also include, they're like, you can't impersonate us. This made me laugh. They're like, you agree not to impersonate or attempt to impersonate any other person, which I personally liked. I've been having a problem. I've been having a teensy weensy little problem recently, and maybe I probably should actually address it on the channel real quick, which is, guys, if top music attorney slash or slash underscore hyphy top music attorney, because I use top music attorney without the slashes. Okay, this is what I'm getting to. Messages you. They're like, hey, John, I have a present for you. Or I want you to buy me a present. Or I want to fly you somewhere. I just need you to send me a quick $200. It's not me. All right. The only thing that I'll ever be like, hey, guys, hey, John. Like, I use IG, I use Top Music Attorney Instagram, and I use my email, and I'll talk to you guys if you need help, if you want to get into my course or whatever. But just so you know, I'm not asking you to like pay for shipping or buy me plane tickets or buy me presents. Okay, that would be great, but I'm not asking anyway. So those are my terms of service. We made this into a totally different video. Back to the agreement. So moving on, sub C, further. You represent and warrant that you have not engaged, nor have you authorized or permitted any third party to engage in illegal boosting, fraudulent streaming, juicing activities, or any similar activities designed to artificially inflate the amount of streams, transmissions, plays, views, all the goodies. Now we're finally getting to the good stuff here. Because so far, we haven't gotten to the whole, like, you agree you're going to forfeit your royalties. We're going to take everything, like some of the other terms of service that we've read, okay? But now, oh, look at that. That was the blue. I teased it. The blue is where we get into the juicy stuff. So, or you haven't used any methods of fabricating, manipulating, artificially increasing, and boosting. Basically, stop paying for the fake plays. That's what they're saying. And they go, if you do, this is what's going to happen. You will have no legal or equitable interest of any kind or any right whatsoever at any time to receive any royalties or other revenues generated as a result of or any way relating to streams, transmissions, impressions, plays, views, engagement, clicks, logs, or other exploitations of your music, which Symphonic, in its sole and absolute discretion, Symphonic is the judge and jury, sole and absolute discretion, if Symphonic suspects or deems to constitute or otherwise attributes to improper activity. And improper activity was defined up here as all of this, right? Illegal boosting, all the fraudstering. That's a new verb I just came up with. All the fraudstering that they're saying. Become your own record label, which is literally if you're like, hey, I want to start a record label. Cool, I got you. Understand the entire music business. I want to set up my LLC. I want to do the marketing. It's a lot. So for example, sync licensing, for example, music marketing, it's significantly cheaper than anything you would ever get from a law firm as far as all the stuff that comes with it. And you want to make 6 figures from your music career and you want to do this for real. Like, I'm going to give you what you need. We've looked at TuneCore and CD Baby and Distrokid. And all of them do say something about if you get caught with the boosting, if people even make claims in some instances that you have engaged in copyright infringement, trademark infringement, or something otherwise unlawful. Very, very general language. Then we as the distributor reserve the right to do all kinds of stuff. And how aggressive that all kinds of stuff is has been something that's a little bit different amongst the different distributors. The absolute harshest being TuneCore, hands down, but all of them reserve the rights to basically forfeit your royalties. And to Symphonic's credit, this is actually the only place that they really talk about this. So they don't, spend out of their 10 pages here, they don't spend, a fourth of the agreement just being like all the ways that they're going to take your money and come after you and all this stuff. So that's one positive that I'll at least note. They do reserve the right. They're like, look, if you get caught and you're doing these naughty things, we get to make the decision. That's my problem. As an actual practitioner, as the person who is literally dealing with these distributors for you guys, I can tell you that there's a lot of nonsense as far as I'm like, hey, I'm not even contesting that that's what your contract says. I go, let's pretend we signed it because we did, and we'll take the lashings, so to speak. But you need to show me that my client actually did this. And some of the problems have been, including with TuneCore, where they never actually produced evidence. They're like, these are our proprietary ways that we know of the sneakiness. I'm like, okay, so you're just gonna say something. I'm at least producing evidence. I'm actually producing things for my clients. So, this is kind of where some of this frustration is coming from. But as it relates specifically to Symphonic, okay, they're saying you don't have any claim. So they're nicer in the way that they're saying. They're like, you don't have any claim to your illegal funds. Whereas everyone else is just like, you forfeit it. We're going to come after you. We reserve the right to even sue you for, funds that we've paid you. And our problem with a lot of this stuff is just that it's a little silly. I'm like, you're the bank. Who are you? If you're like, you violated Spotify's terms of service, but you, the distributor, are going to come and take the royalties and keep them for yourselves. You're like all trying to protect Spotify. I'm like, wouldn't you just give the money back to Spotify? Well, no, that's not what they do. So this is my fundamental issue. I digress. Let's move on. All right, enforcement. We reserve the right to investigate or take action against you in our sole discretion. Okay. Such action may include removing or modifying your music, suspending or terminating your account, and or reporting you to law enforcement authorities. Okay, I did laugh about that. Because I didn't see that, or I don't recall seeing that in any of the other distributor terms, because some of them are pretty aggressive. I'm like sweating reading some of their terms, but here they're like, we're gonna drag you to the police. That's not who they would report to, but in any case, that is what it says. Something I just wanted to point out, they go, if you give us feedback. So keep this in mind, because they specifically address, if you decide to write a little email, because I wrote some little emails to Symphonic over the issue that I had with them, which I'll tell you guys about. But anyway, apparently this is what they can do with your feedback. If you provide Symphonic with any feedback or suggestions regarding the services, you hereby assign to Symphonic all rights and such feedback and agree that Symphonic shall have the right to use and fully exploit such feedback and relating information in any manner it deems appropriate. Symphonic will treat any feedback you provide as non-confidential and non-proprietary. So like basically they're gonna like use your emails for whatever they want. Now look, in one kind of way, I can just be like, look, if someone's like, oh my gosh, Symphonic is the best, I love them forever, and they want to use that email as a screenshot for their social media or something, I get it. But where this worries me for you guys, and even for myself, is, you don't have an expectation that your feedback, your communications with them is going to be used in any kind of public way, or that it might be used in a commercial, or it might be used for social media or whatever. Just a thought. Moving on, indemnification. We talked about this with the other distributors. So this is common, guys. And this, I don't like it, but it is common. So indemnification is where it says that you indemnify Symphonic, meaning you will pay their attorney's fees if anything happens. If there's ever a third-party claim that arises because of whatever, you're using their platform, there was a violation of law, you breached some kind of contract, you screwed over Susie and you didn't give her 25%. Now Susie's suing, Symphonic. That's normal. But just so you know, as a pro tip, when you see these provisions in contracts that you are signing, you do want to make sure that they're mutual. So, meaning, fine, I'll indemnify Symphonic if Susie sues her because of me and because Symphonic didn't have anything to do with it. But if we were actually negotiating this, I would say Symphonic has to indemnify you because something could happen. And you could get sued because of the other person. So I just want to make sure you know that and should make sure you try to make your indemnification provisions mutual. And then this is where we just start just going down and hitting our heads against the wall, which is not just indemnification, but then they get into release. And they're like, hey, just so you know, you hereby release that forever discharge Symphonic and all of our affiliates and respective officers, employees, agents, successors, and assigned, and forever waive and relinquish each and every past, present, future claim, controversy, demand, right, liability, or cause of action of any kind and nature, including personal injury, death, and property damage that arises directly or indirectly out of your use of our services. So they're just like, hey, P.S., you can't sue us for anything. Now, they know, or at least their attorneys know, that this is not actually enforceable in all states. It might be in some, but not all. So they even put a little disclaimer, because in California, man, they do not like this kind of nonsense. They don't like huge waivers and you can't sue me for this and my liability is limited to $1. California's cool like that. They really try to make it friendly to, employees and users and things like that. But elsewhere, this stuff can be enforceable. It is enforceable. And so it's a big deal when you're like, hey, I'm just going to release you of all liability because something bad happens. And then reasonably, you should be able to be made whole for those things. So P.S., that's in there. Moving on. Number 6, Section 6, disclaimers. All right, so they're saying you're using their services as is. They make no warranty that the services will meet any requirements that you'll have uninterrupted services, that stuff will be timely. They're saying all this may not ever happen. We're not agreeing that stuff is going to be error-free, that stuff is not going to have viruses or harmful code, or that it will be legal or even safe. And then also, some jurisdiction won't allow this. So just, just so you guys know, you are agreeing to this. All right. And then this is the last. So this is the trifecta. So the trifecta of indemnification, disclaimers, and then the limitation of liability. Okay. In no event. So now we go somehow we did get past, let's say, all the initial stuff and we sued them. And you said, Crystal, I have been damaged. They took my 80,000 of royalties. Real stuff happening, right? They took my 80,000 of royalties and alleged all this nonsense and I want it back. And then the distributor says, no. And so then our next step or option is to sue them. So then we have to overcome the issues of, well, you signed the contract and it says you're going to release them of liability, right? Well, Section 7 addresses how much you can sue them for. So if you look right here, in no event shall Symphonic have to pay for any indirect, consequential, exemplary, incidental, or punitive damages. It goes on to the fullest extent to the law. We will not pay any more, and there's a limit up to $50. And this includes that if there's more than one claim. If you have a bunch of claims against us, you can't get more than the $50. So, guys, I want to be super straight with you about this, that, for the hundreds and thousands of contracts that I've reviewed, stuff like this is normal in that companies and big companies, they just add this in because it just gives them a lot of protection so that they're not getting sued left, right, and center. And that if they do get sued, the liability might just be $50. So what we do, just so you know, is that we challenge this and we say this is unconscionable, right? It's unfair. And sometimes we can get some of this stuff blue penciled by the court, but not always. Sometimes in the state that you're in, they're like, this is legal. You signed it. You agreed. You had an opportunity to read it. But nonetheless, we're reading it together. And these are my thoughts. Last couple of things here, and then I'll share my thoughts with Symphonic in general. So Section 8, term and termination. We may suspend, we may terminate your right to use the services at any time for any reason, our sole discretion. So, all the distributors say that. We can kick you off our platform for any reason. Upon termination of this agreement, your account and the right to access the services will terminate. You understand that any termination of your account may involve permanent deletion of your music associated with your account. Small thing, guys, but just make sure your music is backed up. Don't rely on trying to get your music back from your distributor. Okay. And then I made a note for myself. What was it? Oh yeah. So I made a note just in regards to California law. So in California and code 1668, it states that contracts that basically say that they are releasing liability for any fraud, willful injury, violation of law, basically is unenforceable. So just saying there's ways to beat this up. All right. Now here's the fun stuff, sort of, which is if you guys ever have a problem, I always want to point out how you deal with things. Okay. So first and foremost, if you have a copyright claim and you need to file it with Symphonic, this is how you do it. So freeze this, take a screenshot, go look it up yourself, but they have the procedure written out here and they have the email that you have to file. And I want to give you, if for those of you who are still watching, all right, I want to show you something that only true nerds could appreciate, which is if someone ever files a takedown for copyright infringement against your music, here's what you're going to say in response. Pursuant to 17 USC section 512, this is what sets forth how music platforms have to handle stuff. If someone files a copyright infringement claim, this is the language that controls. Now, if you scroll all the way down, okay, so we're going all the way down and we're looking for F. We're not looking for big F. We're looking for little f. Any person who knowingly, materially misrepresents under the section that material is infringing or that material or activity was removed or disabled by mistake shall be liable for any damages, including costs and attorney's fees incurred by the alleged infringer. So just if you are someone who ever deals with someone filing a copyright infringement claim against your content. I had someone do this for a content creator. She has a huge Instagram. She's huge on TikTok. I've had people do this for music, clients of mine. But if someone does this and files a fake copyright takedown pursuant to little f, you can actually seek your attorney's fees. So just FYI, this is something that we do because when we have to deal with this and then you have to hire us, we want to make sure that you have a remedy, and that's how we do it. Anyway, let me finish this up. Going back, so contact information. So that's in section 9. Patents, I just wanted to mention this. It popped out to me because they're literally Symphonic is patenting how they're doing their services. I was like, oh, that's interesting. None of the other distributors have anything like this in their terms. So I don't know. I just want to point that out. And then lastly, complaints. If you need to write a complaint to Symphonic, or to report, I should say, and you're a resident in California, here's the information, okay? This agreement is subject to New York law. We saw that in the TuneCore terms of service. And lastly, here's the contact information. Now, you're curious of what my thoughts are about Symphonic. And I was taking a peek at all of my emails with them because I never had my moment. I never took my moment to really talk about my experience with them because I had been with them for a couple of years. My label had a deal and it otherwise, was fine because these distributors, and here's the thing, with distributors, generally speaking, things normally go fine. You know what I mean? And so we can say the TuneCore terms of service are really aggressive I think that they're unlawful. And, there's people who have been with TuneCore for a long time. They've had a great experience. And it's more of when there's a problem and then you have to go and rely on the contract to defend yourself and to get your royalties and stuff like that. That's when this escalates and someone's like, they're a terrible distributor. So I understand that there's different vacuums that we kind of look at this in. So I do want to be clear that with Symphonic, I had a generally fine relationship. It's pretty simple. Like, you upload stuff for any of these distributors through your account, you tell them when to distribute it, it gets automatically sent to these platforms once it's reviewed. Like, it's not complicated. But I did end up having an issue with Symphonic, and here's what happened. So during COVID, I had finally finished my Dangerous Daughters album. So yes, I'm a lawyer. I've been doing music since I was 4, so I'll never stop. And so this album had just been a labor of love, and there had been so many things that we had to jump through to get it done. And then COVID hit. And so, I'd been promising my followers for a long time that it was coming, right? And we were working up towards that release date, and we're super excited. And COVID hits. And then, we can't actually do a release party. We can't tour. We can't do shows. We can't do anything. The only thing that we could do to have a release kind of thing is to do a live stream. Okay. And so we decided to do the live stream on Facebook and Instagram. And leading up to it, I had just notified Symphonic about it, right? Because at the time, Facebook owns Instagram. So basically, it does the same thing. Whereas today, Meta owns all the things. Anyway, so I just, reached out and, spoke with their customer service. I'm like, hey, just need to make sure that these platforms are whitelisted. And so I gave them the links and all the stuff. And I understand that I'm talking to someone who works for this company. Okay, so I want to be clear about this. When things go awry, because things went awry, but when things go awry and you're, talking with someone and someone had a job and a responsibility, it doesn't mean that this one person was Symphonic talking to me. I'm talking to John, So John, will say that's not his name, but John was like, yeah, we got it. No worries, blah, blah, blah. And I even followed up the day before. I'm like, oh, this is such a big deal. And lo and behold, during the actual live stream and the release party, the thing went down on both platforms, copyright infringement, all this stuff, and I got shut down. So, the pages, who knows what could have happened, but obviously it seemed that they had not actually been whitelisted. So perhaps John did not do the thing. The following day and days, I followed up and I just kind of, expressed my deep frustration, and just at the end of the day, just being I was so upset. And the artist kind of thing. But I just go, look, this thing happened. And I, not that they can do anything at that point, but I was just looking for something. And so they ended up escalating it to one of the higher ups. And this is why this matters. I'm talking to the higher up, explaining it and all that. And you know what? They made the decision to kind of put me down and to say that somehow it was my fault, which just makes no sense. Makes no sense in any realm of anything, because what happened is just it got content ID because my distributor distributed it to Facebook. And then they're like, you're infringing. At the end of the day, it was tough for me just as an artist and more of the customer service thing. And I know you guys have the same kinds of things. You reach out and you're just looking for help. And that's why I sympathize so much with what's going on with not only you getting locked out of your accounts, getting your royalties taken, having crappy customer service, or having a higher up in a department for customer service telling you that it was actually your fault and blaming you and not just sympathizing, oh my gosh, that really sucks. Whatever. So just because of the way that they had treated me, I made the decision. I'm like, look, I'm good. So, I jumped ship and I took my music catalog elsewhere. And, I'd otherwise been promoting Symphonic up until then. I spoke with the people that I was in contact with and just made them aware and this and that. And so for me, I was just good after that. Okay. So for purposes of just recapping, let's wrap it up with the gavel. The terms of service from what I saw were pretty reasonable as far as comparing them to everyone else. Do I think everyone else and how all of these work is reasonable in itself? No. I think it's very one-sided. I think it's very unfair. And I really wish that there would be a leader that emerged that could be like, you know what? Yes, we're a business, but we understand that artists have to go through us. Artists don't have the right to negotiate these contracts. Artists don't have the right to let us know if they're not okay with something because they don't have a choice. And to be clear, I'm talking about the majority of independent artists because yes, there are boutique distributors that maybe you can negotiate your deal with. There are big distributors who work with the majors who also might sign you, okay? There may be exceptions to what I'm saying. But what I'm talking about are the DIY distributors like Distrokid and Symphonic and CD Baby and TuneCore, and just being like, I'm not for someone who deals with these companies directly and the issues that I've had with some of them and their legal representation and what they say and how they treat artists versus maybe these little isolated incidents of it's really tough when there's like poor customer service and they're not managing these things well. And then we have the actual contract. You obviously don't care that much about artists. And what do you guys think? Should they? Because here's the thing, they are just a business. My biggest complaint here is that just it's a type of business where we wish that someone would care. We wish that someone would put themselves out there for artists because other people aren't and companies aren't. And distributors are just glorified banks. And so when we see that they are exploiting artists and being like, hey, you forfeit your royalties, the second we get wind of even a claim of something, we're literally just going to take all of your royalties. And for some of our clients who this is a huge part of their business because they actually work really hard on their marketing and they have great streams and they make good money. So all of a sudden 50 grand is locked in an account. I would hope they wouldn't have to get a lawyer. That's what I'm trying to say. I would hope that they would be able just to go through customer service and get this resolved, but they don't. They contact me and then I break down the door and we get a response. And like I said, we have a very high success rate and that's great and everything, but it doesn't change my general frustration. So guys, I'm really curious for those of you who are signed with Symphonic, who can share your experience, drop a comment down below. I'm so excited to be helping you with your music careers and for you to be part of our top music attorney community. So make sure you subscribe.